Hey folks, Zach Osterman here, you Insider Indianapolis Star with your Friday rundown for August 29th, 2025. And as you can imagine, I think it's pretty obvious what's going to dominate the rundown today, which is the start of Indiana's 2025 football season. I would say inarguably the most highly anticipated season, certainly at least in Indiana's modern history. If we want to go back to the Rose Bowl, and I know that's modern in one way, but in terms of kind of the living memory of the vast majority of Indiana fans, this is going to kind of take first prize. And there is, I think it's fair to say, a palpable sense of excitement around town. I know these first three games aren't necessarily primetime matchups. We'll talk a little bit about Curt Cignetti's approach to them here in a minute, but in general, there's still just been so much excitement and so much sort of, building across the course of the last several months, even coming out of last season, and all the players that Indiana was able to keep from last season. Of course, the work Indiana was able to do in the transfer portal, and now, even with some national pundits picking Indiana as a potential playoff contender again, you can understand why Indiana fans are excited for the season that's about to start. So 2:30 p.m. Saturday, kind of a weird kickoff time, but that's 2:30 p.m. Saturday, Old Dominion in Bloomington. And I want to start today with just kind of a look at Old Dominion. Is three kind of key talking points, I guess, that have come out of sort of scouting ODU. The first one is Colton Joseph, their starting quarterback. He was their backup at the beginning of last season behind Grant Wilson, who's obviously now at Indiana. Joseph kind of won that job from him fairly early in the year. He finished last season with 2,274 total yards and 22 total touchdowns. 11 of those were rushing touchdowns. He had, I think, multiple games with 60-plus yards rushing, and that's not sack adjusted, so you can imagine he can use his legs. They are a very real weapon, and if you actually look at his numbers a little bit more detail, all but 104 of those 2,274 yards, I got the numbers over here on my notepad, all but 104 of his 2,274 total offensive yards last season came beginning in week 3 when he became the starting quarterback. ODU didn't go to a bowl game last year, so that's basically about 2,100 yards in 10 weeks. And I think I want to say something like all but one of those total touchdowns in 10 weeks as well. He had multiple games, 2 games last season where he rushed for 3 touchdowns. So, I mean, again, we are talking about a genuine sort of dual threat type quarterback, one that is going to challenge an Indiana defensive line, an Indiana linebacker core, an Indiana secondary that's going to be breaking in a lot of new faces. And Indiana's going to have to work really hard to, keep Joseph in his pocket and sort of force him to beat him with his arm and not let him use his legs a lot. If you look on the other side of the ball for the Monarchs, really good linebackers. They've got multiple impact players back from last season. Jason Henderson's one, and I believe it's Koa Naotala was their leading tackler last season. It sounds like he's banged up, may not be healthy for this game. That would obviously be a boost for Indiana. I think Ricky Rainey said this week that he's trying to do everything he can to get healthy, so it sounds like it's going to be, kind of a coin flip. Of course, if you're Old Dominion, you probably weigh up how much do you risk a player like that in week 1 when you've got a whole season ahead. But that's going to be an area, just that second level of the defense is one that I think is where ODU might feel like it can cause Indiana some trouble when Indiana has the ball. And then the third thing I would say about Old Dominion is really more something that Curt Cignetti has hammered home for weeks now, which is Sun Belt teams make life difficult early in the season for Power 4 teams all the time, and Cignetti has cited all kinds of upsets. He authored one himself at James Madison. He pointed out ODU has formed for beating Virginia Tech in the recent past. Georgia State beat Vandy last year. Georgia Southern beat Nebraska a few years ago in Lincoln. That is a conference that has, there's a lot of talent there. And maybe some, certainly, maybe sometimes that's players that wind up one rung down the ladder because maybe they're a little too raw coming out of high school. Maybe maybe they're just a little bit too flawed in one way or the other. Maybe they're a little small or a little slow or whatever, but the talent in general, the total aggregate talent is still really good. And they do have to reload, obviously. Indiana is one of many Power 4 programs that has gone down to the Sun Belt for quality transfers, even outside of James Madison. You think about multiple transfers from ODU on the roster last year. Mekhi Jackson comes in from App State this year. So that's always going to be kind of the challenge for coaches like Ricky Rainey. But it is a conference with form for pulling these kinds of upsets, and I think Cignetti is intent upon not letting any sort of complacency seep into his locker room. I think that one of Indiana's strengths last year was an ability to maintain a healthy respect for basically everyone that they played. And I think that, from Indiana's perspective this year, it is, I think one of the things that Cignetti has really hammered home is nothing changes from a mindset perspective, even if maybe the expectations change, the opportunities change. He doesn't want anything to change from a mindset perspective. And I think Old Dominion is a real good sort of canary in the coal mine in terms of sort of measuring how Indiana is kind of basically as a whole team handling greater expectations, more attention, more opportunity, and probably just more praise, frankly. So it'll be interesting. Curt Cignetti did throw out a little bit of news Thursday night. Mike Niziolek was there at his first coaches show of the year. Khalil Benson will start at right tackle for Indiana. That presumably means Zen Michalski is kind of the odd man out. Indiana's always kind of had 6 from 5. We knew Carter Smith would be the left tackle. We knew that if he was healthy and fit, Drew Evans would be the left guard, Pat Coogan at center. And the question was kind of what was the arrangement in terms of 3 from 2 going to be of Bray Lynch, who was the right guard last season, Khalil Benson, who's played both spots throughout his time at Indiana and Colorado, and then Zen Michalski, who's really only ever played tackle, and I think at Ohio State only really ever played left tackle. So even playing right tackle was a little bit different for him. Cignetti confirmed at least that Benson is starting at right tackle, so I think we can surmise from that, and maybe we'll be proven wrong on Saturday, but I think we can surmise from that the starting 5 on the offensive line then goes Smith, Evans, left to right, Smith, Evans, Coogan, Lynch, Benson. I think you'll still see plenty of Zen Michalski. Of course, last year Indiana needed 7 offensive linemen in terms of bulk snaps to get through the season because of injuries. I think if anything, and it'll be interesting because what you'd probably like, because I think some of Indiana's younger lineman crop, I think the players further along are probably some interior guys. And so, I think, and like Coogan, I think the ideal for an offensive line is to have sort of established tackles with one swing player behind them that can fill in at either side, 3 from 2 for your guard spots, obviously a center that plays pretty much exclusively when healthy, and then one of those guards who's capable of stepping in at center if anything happens to the starting center. Coogan is obviously established at starting center. You've got Carter Smith on the left. Now, obviously, Khalil Benson on the right. You would imagine Zen Michalski, at minimum, can back up both of them. I think, it would probably be helpful if Indiana could get one more interior guy to just have 3 from 2 for both interior spots as well as both tackle spots. I think Bray Lynch is probably that number 2 center if something happens to Pat Coogan. So, kind of watch this space, I guess, or watch how that develops. Indiana, it feels like, could maybe use one more interior lineman that it can really step up and that really steps up and it can feel like it can count on. But we at least know kind of how things are going to shake out at right tackle now, which was one of the sort of position battles we've been watching through fall camp. An update on Lewis Moore. His case has been pushed out another 14 days. He is eligible, therefore, for these first 2 games of the season. We talked about this on Mind Your Banners. As always, please go listen to that. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can listen to it and watch it on here. We did kind of a marathon Mind Your Banners episode. Went a lot longer this week, just previewing this season from a lot of different angles, schedule breakdown, over-unders, different things like that, me and Mike. So, again, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can watch it and listen to it on here. We'll do it live every Wednesday as well as our post-game shows on Saturdays. Also, you can listen to it wherever you listen to your podcast, Spotify, Apple, etc. We talked about at the top of the show the Lewis Moore sort of situation. He will be eligible. His judge kind of granted, just push this out another 14, the judge in the case, push this out about another 14 days. Moore will be eligible for these 2 games. There's not going to be any penalty for Indiana playing him because he's been declared eligible. If he's declared ineligible after that, obviously that's when there would be penalties, but it won't be like Indiana's taking any risk if they play Lewis Moore from an eligibility perspective in these first 2 games. The final resolution, I think, will come at the end of this sort of 14-day continuance or extension, however the language is best sort of delivered. The question, I think, for Indiana is more, how do they handle it? If Byron Baldwin is the other player at that position, do you start him? Do you give him more of those snaps and more of those minutes? Because ultimately, you're going to need him to get that experience and have more time on task under his belt, so he's ready for Illinois, he's ready for Iowa, and so on. Or do you lean on Lewis Moore and just sort of go with experience and hope that it sort of works out for the best down the line? I think that's one of the big questions for Indiana in the secondary going into this weekend. But we talked about that a lot more on Mind Your Banners. I encourage you to go watch that or listen to it if you'd prefer to listen to it just purely as a podcast, wherever you get those. A couple of just kind of scattered IU notes to finish up here. We will obviously, and I'll kind of tease all our post-game coverage for Saturday, but you can come back here to the YouTube channel for our post-game show on Saturday, as we did through all of last season. Another comeback win for IU soccer on Thursday night. The Hoosiers are down, I think, 1-0 at halftime to Green Bay, scored 2 second-half goals, 1-2-1. That's after falling behind to San Francisco and then coming back and winning 3-2. You know, it's obviously, if you're Todd Yeagley, you want a little bit more, consistency and evenness in your performances. I would point out, Indiana turned over, and I wrote about this before the Clemson game, before the start of the regular season. Indiana turned over a lot on that roster from a year ago. New face at goalkeeper, not just new faces in attack, but a new sort of way, almost just kind of a new attack in the sense of we're going to have to create chances differently. We're going to have to be looking for different kinds of opportunities, creating different kinds of goals, essentially to what Indiana had become accustomed to scoring with Tommy Michalski and Sam Sarver, really sort of as kind of the pillars of its attack the last couple years. Or Tommy Mihalik, I'm sorry, I don't know why I said Zin Michalski, Tommy Mihalik, not Tommy Michalski, forgive me. But, even in midfield, some new faces, some players who'd played a lot of football, played a lot of soccer, including at Michigan State, at Evansville, at a fairly high level, but there's just going to be some stuff that you, even with experience and even with time together, there's just going to be some stuff that you can only work out in games. And I think that, I suspect Yeagley will have expected a certain level of unevenness to Indiana's performances. And I think probably what he'd tell you is, Indiana soccer's business is in October and November, not August and September. And as long as, Indiana is playing its best football, by the heart of Big Ten season onward, everything's going to be okay. But that it does raise another interesting, or it makes Sunday night's game against Oregon State, another ranked team, top 15, I think, at this point. It kind of another one of these intriguing early season matchups. Of course, Indiana drew with Clemson to start the season in a real blue blood showdown. Oregon State's been a very good program for a number of years, and that's just kind of another test for this group that I think is still trying to figure out ways to gel and to coalesce together. But I think the other thing you'd probably say for Todd Yeagley is, well, if while we're going through these growing pains we're winning, then we'll take it and we'll just keep trying to build off it, learn from it. Just sort of like a basketball recruiting note, Tay Kinney will be in town for an official visit. He's scheduled to be in town for an official visit this weekend. He's a top 20 point guard with overtime elite in the current senior class. I think there are those who feel like maybe he's right now kind of tilting ever so slightly toward Louisville, but Indiana's still in there, Kansas is still in there, and this will be the first in a number of, I think, fairly high-profile visits for Darren DeVries and his staff this fall. We really have transitioned. I talked about this with somebody today. We really have transitioned from, you think about maybe about 8-10 years ago, the general wisdom was always that you would try to get all of your biggest prospects, on campus sort of in clusters. If you get them all together, all the better. The idea being, you want them to sort of visualize what it would be like for all of them to be playing together in your program, on your campus, at your school. Now, it's really changed to the point where it's almost like the top targets. You only want one player on campus with their family in any given week, and that way they get all the attention. They are the complete sort of focus of all of your staff's efforts in that official visit weekend. We've seen schools move away from having their top targets at Midnight Madness type events for that reason, and we've seen more of this, of players being comfortable really getting into their official visit process pretty much as soon as the school year starts and everything's settled and schools can start hosting them. So Kenny will take an official this weekend to IU, and that will be one, obviously, to watch closely. He's one of the best point guards in his class. Last thing is just what to expect from us Saturday evening and moving forward this season. A lot of it will look familiar. We'll have immediate post-game reactions, report cards. We'll do our post-game podcast, of course. And then, insiders, breakouts, sidebars from the game. There's not a lot that's going to change. I think we're probably just going to expand a little bit on what we've been doing, in particular, the stuff that you'll be able to find from us in terms of how we break down the game in the immediate aftermath of the game. I think there's going to be a little bit more sort of, quick reaction content from us this season to accompany those post-game podcasts, which you can, of course, as I sign off with a shameless plug, watch here at IndyStar TV Hoosiers. Usually pretty reliably, about 45 minutes to an hour after the game. Once we're done with all of our interviews with Kurt Signetti, with players, that's when we find a quiet spot and sit down and do our live podcast. You'll be able to watch it here, IndyStar TV Hoosiers, all season long. Same with basketball once we get to that portion of the calendar. So please remember to like and subscribe. And to come back to the YouTube channel for, all of the content that we will be pushing across the next several months. It should be fascinating. It should be fun. And we'd love to have you along for the ride. So for now, for the Indianapolis Star, I'm Zach Osterman. This has been your Friday Rundown for August 29th, 2025. We will talk to you soon.